All right, today's lesson is on solving inequalities. So just like solving equations, but there's a few different rules. Obviously now we have a inequality sign in there. So there's one major thing that you have to remember that's different about solving or from solving equations. And it's when you multiply or divide both sides by a negative number. So multiply or divide, you have to flip the inequality sign. So if it was pointing to the right, it needs to be switched to the left and vice versa. So make sure you highlight that, make sure it's a big thing you remember. So we're just going to do a few examples. So we've got x plus 9 is less than 15. Here we would subtract 9 on both sides. We're not multiplying or dividing, so our sign stays the same. X is less than 6. When we graph that on a number line, it's going to be an open circle on 6, pointing left towards the smaller numbers. Example 2 is d minus 3 is greater than negative 6. So we're going to add 3 to both sides. And we get d is greater than negative 3. We don't flip a sign there because we're not multiplying or dividing by a negative. Open circle, arrow to the right on negative 3. Example 3. 0.7 is greater than or equal to n minus 0.4. So we're going to add 0.4 to get n by itself. 1.1 is greater than or equal to n, or we can switch that around and say n is less than or equal to 1.1. On a number line, we're going to have a closed circle on 1.1, and it's going to point to the left. It's going to point to the left. I did that wrong. Points to the left, because our variable's on the right side. For example 4, we have s plus 1 is less than or equal to 10. So we have s is less than or equal to 9. When we graph that, we're going to have a closed circle on 9, arrow pointing to the left. Again, just like on example 3 where it's pointing to the left. Sorry about that mistake, guys. Make sure you have it correct in your notes. Example 5, we've got 3x is greater than 9. Divide both sides by 3. We are not dividing by a negative number, so we do not flip the sign. We're going to have an open circle on 3, arrow pointing to the right. Example 6, we've got negative 2x is less than or equal to 10. This time we are going to divide by a negative, so we flip the sign. So pay attention to this part. I'm highlighting it for you. That is a negative 2 that we're dividing by. So now our arrow flips and we have x is greater than or equal to negative 5 instead of less than or equal to. So when we graph that, we're going to have a closed circle on negative 5 and our arrow going to the right. Example 7. We got x over 5 is less than 2. To get rid of that over 5, we multiply by 5. We have x is less than 10. So open circle on 10 and arrow towards the smaller values, which is to the left. Now let's do some harder examples after example 8. So this one we have 3 is less than x over negative 2. We're going to multiply both sides by negative 2. And we get negative 6 is greater than x. So this time we should have an open circle on negative 6 and our arrow going to the left. See, this time I switched it so that I wouldn't mess up the graph again, like I did on example 3. Don't forget to fix that on your notes. Now some harder examples. So for the first one, we have negative 5x plus 7 is greater than 22. So SADMAP order here. We're going to subtract 7 from both sides. We get negative 5x is greater than 15. Here we're going to be dividing by a negative 5. So since we're dividing by a negative, remember this is when we are going to flip the sign. Okay, so now it's going to be x is less than negative 3. I'm highlighting it because we're dividing by a negative. Don't forget about that part. So this is just a little note. Remember that since we divided both sides by a negative, we are flipping the sign. This is the biggest part of the unit, guys. Don't forget this part. Okay, so for this one, we're going to have an open circle on -3, and our arrow will be going to the left towards the smaller examples if we graphed it, but we're not graphing on this side. Now we're going to compare and contrast like an equation to an inequality. So let's watch and see what happens and see how your steps will be a little different. Okay, so for the two-step equation, we've got -3x plus 4 equals 19. So same thing on the inequality side, but it's going to be greater than 19. So focusing on the equation, we subtract 4 in SADMAP order, and then we divide by -3. So we get x equals -5. So we have one possible answer, and that is -5. Now that'll be a little different here because we subtract 4, then we divide by -3. Remember to flip the sign. So we have x is less than -5. So that means that we have a lot of possible solutions. So we've got -6, -7, -8, -9, like all numbers that are going further into the negatives. You could have also done -5.5 or -5.1. So there's an infinite number of possible answers because it goes down to a negative infinity. So that's something important about inequalities. So it's a specific infinite number of solutions, but there is an infinite number of solutions. A few more examples. We've got -3e minus 10 is less than or equal to -4. So here we're going to add 10 to both sides, just like usual. Then we're going to divide by -3, which means we are going to flip the sign. If you're good at solving equations, you should be good at this unit. If not, make sure that you tune in for your teacher's tutorials. Figure out those times. Make sure that you show up for them. Possible solutions here are going to be all things like -2 should be all things greater than -2, so -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. You could also have decimals in there. For example, 4, we subtract 8 first. Then we're going to multiply both sides by 2. We did not multiply by a negative here, so we do not flip the sign. But I do like to have my variable on the left just so that it's easier to read. So we've got c is greater than 6, which means 6 cannot be a possible answer. But we have 6.1, 6.001, 7, 8, 9, 10, all numbers bigger than 6 that are possible solutions. We've got -29 is less than or equal to 3 minus 8x. That 3 is positive, so we subtract it from both sides. And then we're going to end up dividing by -8, which means we flip the sign again. And we're going to have +4 is greater than or equal to x. I like to make sure you flip the inequality when you flip the whole equation. I just like to read it as x is less than or equal to 4 so that I know all the possible solutions are 4 and below.